We're going to go with Facebook Live. We might. I'll hit program 1 when that gets down to like 5 seconds. Right now, I'm only hearing out of one headset. Is that where you're at? Can you hear out of both?
Well, you know both.
Okay, good. If I jiggle it just right.
Do you want me to keep talking while you jiggle it?
Well, I can kind of hear the sound itself.
Oh, okay.
Either way is good, as long as I can hear it. That's what matters.
True.
Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody. Oh, there we are. Thanks for waiting. This is the Extraordinary Talk Show with your host, Della Hill. And I'm here today with a very, very special guest that I'm super excited to have talk to all you guys. This is my very good friend, Cody Ramallah.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Cody.
Thank you.
Now, some of you might remember if you were listening last week, we were talking about the Golden Path, but I also told a story about one friend lighting a fire on the mountain for his other friend and the promise going forward that the friends would be there for each other to light the fire of friendship when one needed it. And one reason I'm so happy to have Cody on here today is because Cody is one of those friends of mine who is lighting a fire for me, a fire of friendship that I know that I have that friendship there when I need it. And he's been so supportive about so many things. Another thing I've talked about is having people around you that help you, that support you, that motivate you, and that understand where you're coming from. So Cody is one of those people for me that I can tell him some crazy things and he's just going to go, wow, that's kind of cool, and help me understand it even better. So welcome, Cody. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm so glad you came. Well, our time is limited, so let's jump right in. Now, last week we talked about the Golden Path, and one of the reasons that I wanted to have Cody on today is because Cody is on his Golden Path. In fact, it's pretty phenomenal to find someone who has found their path and understands it and recognizes it and is moving forward on that path. And when you're on your path, you don't always know where that's going to go or what it's going to look like, but you know when you're there that you're on the right path. So, Cody, I want to talk to you about your path. How did you find it? How did you realize that you had a path?
That's a great question. So it all started probably right after high school, when I grew up in the society where it was very materialistic. People were wanting the next best thing, the next, new car, new house, new whatever, you can name it. And I had friends that were trying to achieve that every day. For me, that totally just was not what I wanted. So after high school, I ended up selling or throwing away everything I owned, packing it back down to 2 bags, a backpack and a bag, and moving out to California. And through a random set of circumstances, I ended up in literally the middle of the redwoods with my best friend, and just went on a crazy adventure. And while I was there, it's just kind of interesting you say the 2 friends lighting the fire for each other, because that's exactly what we did, literally on the side of a mountain in the middle of the redwoods. And so we ended up just kind of soul searching while we were there. I was there for 6 months, completely dependent on other people. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I ended up reading a book while I was out there called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And it was exactly what I needed to hear to first find my higher self, to find my golden path. it's basically just this amazing book about this guy also searching, who finds his golden path and his mentor, and going on an amazing venture, and failing a lot along the way. And I think that is something that I also connected to, that you don't have to be perfect. Kind of like you were saying, you don't really know where it's going to go, what's going to end up, what's going to become of you when you sit down on your path, but just you know that you are on the right path. Kind of following your destiny, for lack of a better term.
Great. That's awesome. So can you tell me what were some of the first steps that you took on your golden path? Maybe you didn't even realize you were doing it.
I had no idea I was doing it. I had no clue just how much I was changing. And the first steps were, just following this idea that I had at the time, that I wanted to live a life of abundance with zero money. That's really what taught me a lot of sometimes harsh life lessons. And where I very first encountered this amazing energy. This one in particular, where I was hitchhiking out to a beach to be a part of this celebration of the new moon, or of the full moon, sorry. And we got out there, and one thing that we were talking about on the way up to the spot to start hitchhiking is just wouldn't that be cool if we saw a sign that we could hold up that said Moonstone Beach. That's where we're going out to this celebration. And we were talking about that, laughing at how it'd be cool. And then we came up to the spot, and there was a sign on the ground that said Alaska. And so we're like, oh man, that's hilarious. There actually is a sign, not what I thought it would be. So let's just fly it anyway and say we're not actually going to Alaska. We just thought it was funny. We're just going up the road about 5 miles. And so we picked it up, and on the other side of the sign, it said Moonstone Beach. And we were just totally blown away. We were just like, man, what is going on here? And we got out there, and I was expecting just this big, amazing thing when I got there, and there was not another soul on the beach. It was just me and my buddy there.
So you thought it was going to be like all perfect because you had found this sign that had the name of where you were going, and there was supposed to be a big party there, but you got there and nothing?
And exactly. It was like, when you come from this kind of high, when you found a sign and you're like, man, I totally just manifested that. This is amazing. This is exactly what I need to be doing. And then you get out there, and there was nothing at all. And it was a little disheartening at first, for sure. But we just decided to just go with it, stay there, light a fire, and just hang out and see what happened. And so next thing you know, more and more people started showing up randomly, asking us, is this where the party is? And we're, yeah, I guess so. Sure. Why not? And more and more people, guys showed up with a bunch of drums. Next thing you know, there's fire dancers. And next thing you know, it's just this huge celebration that we literally manifested around us. And one of the coolest experiences I'll never forget while I was there is watching one of these fire dancers and just mesmerized. And her eyes just locked on mine, just was staring through my soul. And I had no idea what to think about it. And afterwards, she came and grabbed me, and we sat on this huge rock, and we just started talking about the universe. And I'll never forget what she said to me. And she said, have you ever thought about the word universe? And like, well, sort of. And she's like, but have you really, really thought about it? Like what it means? And I said, well, no, not at all. And she said, it's just one verse in the whole song. And we're a part of that. We get to be a part of this one verse, and everybody is playing their tune absolutely perfectly, their note absolutely perfectly. That I'm getting energy tingles as we're talking about it.
Me too.
And we're all on just different vibrations, playing those different notes, and that's all that is. But we're all playing it perfectly in tune on this one verse of the song that is the whole. And it was just probably one of the most astounding signs that, like, man, I'm onto something huge here. Something's going on.
Wow. That I love that whole story. And I love that whole story because it's a metaphor for your whole golden path. Because you decided to try out, just see where you could go, see what would happen. So you made the effort to leave the house. That's the first step, is literally the first step, actually going. and you didn't know where it would take you, but you literally found a sign saying, go here. And it was exactly where you already wanted to go. So it was one of those signs that said, hey, you're on the right path, keep going. And then all of us, when we're on our path, have those disheartening moments. So you got to the beach and you were like, wow, that was so cool. We found the sign. Yay, we're here. Oh, there's nothing happening. What's going on? And it's disheartening, just like you said, when you feel like you're following the path, you are making the effort, you find the signs, and then you follow it, and it feels like it's not working. It feels frustrating. But you kept going, and you said, you know what? You and your friend are there. You might as well have a good time together. And before you knew it, a whole party just showed up all around you. And I love that so much. And that's, if you could tell the story of the Golden Path in 5 minutes or less, like you just did, that would be it. That you got to take one step out the door. You don't always know where you're going. You find the signs. Sometimes it's disheartening, but you just stick with it. And before you know, it's all there and all happening. Would you say that was kind of how it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that's a perfect analogy of the Golden Path.
That's fantastic. I love that story. And I also love the part about the universe. And that reminds me of something I said, I think, last week on the show, and I think you and I have talked about it, about that we are all notes. So this is one of those synchronicities where things come together, and those happen a lot, especially, well, they happen a lot to me and they happen a lot to you, and sometimes they happen to both of us at the same time, which is the definition of synchronicity, that things happen at the same time. But those synchronicities can be signs. Anyway, so last week I was saying that you make a note, you have a vibration, you have a sound, and other people might have a sound that is also a beautiful sound, but that doesn't mean it matches yours. And then there are other people who do have a beautiful sound and they do match yours, and that's when their frequency matches your frequency, and it all comes together, and it's so beautiful. And when you look at that, you can look at other people and go, you know what, that person, they don't match my frequency, but that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gives you a greater understanding where people are and where they're coming from. You can literally just change your perspective on where people are at in their lives and really kind of maybe even have a little compassion for where they are, because, either they're on your frequency ahead of you or below you. And either way, you can either connect, look up to, and aspire to be on the same frequency, or have compassion and help other people that aren't on your same frequency. It just kind of gives you a great understanding too.
That is exactly right. And I think that that's a lot of what our path is helping other people. I've never yet met someone whose path had nothing to do with helping others. Most of our path, and this, again, everybody's path is unique and different for them, but most of us have a path that's built to make ourselves better, and as we do that, help other people along the way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it seems that the more you love and have that compassion for others along the way, the more it just comes back to you tenfold.
Exactly. Isn't that so cool when that happens too?
Yes, absolutely. It's amazing.
It is awesome. My husband, the wonderful Chris, who you also know, Cody and Chris are good friends too. He every time he gets when he kind of gets on his path a little bit, and when he's like, all right, I have a plan, I'm going to do this, I'm going to work towards it, and he has goals in mind, he also realizes that the more goodness he puts out, the better. And anybody that waits on us at a restaurant is going to reap the benefits of that, because he always tips way overboard when he's got a goal, because he knows that the more he gives, the more he'll get back. And it's kind of funny to see that he wants to do that so much, and that's something that he follows.
That's
okay,
awesome.
So that was a bunch of years ago when you were just starting out in the Redwoods. So where are you on your path now? Can you give us an idea of what you've learned and where you're at now?
Oh, absolutely. So, fast forward for a few years and a lot of circumstances, and I was completely stagnant on my path for about 5 years or so. I made a decision to be with a lady that just simply wasn't right for me, and my intuition was screaming at me, and my higher self was saying, this is not what you need. But I just chose to ignore it and do this anyway, and I was completely stagnant. In fact, I mentioned The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. There's a point in that book as well where he actually marries a lady who's wrong for him and ends up off of his path because of it. Just kind of stagnant, stunning his growth, and there's a part in there where he went out and cried as if he was missing something. He didn't know what, but it was just, there was all of a sudden something that wasn't right. And it's a perfect analogy of how I felt for those 5 years. There was just something, part of me that I just didn't feel right. And so I became completely atheist, non-spiritual, like there's no higher self. Everything has to have proof. And it was actually good for me because it was also my higher self leading me back to my path, which I didn't realize at the time. It was me protecting myself at the time, and then digging deeper into science and kind of figuring how things work in the world for myself, which brought me to quantum physics. And when I started kind of really diving into quantum physics about a year and a half ago, and then again here like 4 months ago or so, even more so, and just really understanding that on the base level, everything is energy, everything. That energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. And so when I realized that that's all everything is on the base level, is all we are is energy, then it started making sense that I could tap into that energy and be on a higher frequency. I really started learning about the energy from our hearts and our brains, and how you can measure them about 8 feet away from us at any given moment, and even more so if there's multiple people. And then that led to the path of mirroring neurons, and how like literally right now our brains are firing on the same circuits and making the same neural pathways in our brains, which means that when we're together, that energy is multiplied. It means that there is something huge going on here.
And those are things that are so exciting for me too. And one thing that Cody and I have been friends for a few years now, but we were hanging out having dinner one night, and these conversations came up about mirror neurons and about heart energy. And that was kind of when he and I realized that we were interested in the same kind of things and searching for the same kind of things. And just to give the credit for the heart energy, if anybody is interested in that and wants to learn more, they can go to heartmath.org. Is that right, Cody?
Yes.
One thing that I learned from heartmath.org is that all of us, our heart literally puts out energy that can be detected by devices, electronic man-made devices, up to 8 feet away. And it goes out in the shape of a torus. That doesn't mean a car. It goes out in the shape of, it looks kind of like a donut. So it starts at your heart and gets big as it gets away from you, and then kind of closes down again about 8 feet away from you. But the distance can also vary depending on how much energy you're putting out at the time. But since Cody and I are sitting right now about 4 feet away from each other, he and I are both sitting in the middle of each other's heart energy torus. And that's really kind of cool. It's something that you don't realize, you don't think about, but it can be very powerful. And when you spend time with other people all the time, your frequencies tend to kind of balance. And you find that anytime you hang out with any one person for a long time, you notice that you tend to balance each other. And I also love mirror neurons. And I haven't talked about mirror neurons on the show before. So if you don't mind, I'm going to give a quick explanation of what that is.
Absolutely.
The very first time they found mirror neurons was in a lab where they had some monkeys in the lab, and there was a scientist eating a banana. And one of the monkeys had electrodes and everything on his brain, monitoring his brain activity. And they realized that his brain activity was doing the exact same thing as it would be if he were the one eating the banana. But he was watching the scientist across the room eat the banana, and his brain reacted as though he was the one eating the banana. So when we are in a room with somebody, around people, our brains literally mirror each other. And that gives you a lot to think about when you think about the influence that you have on other people. Because we all know when we're in a room with somebody who's really in a bad mood, how it affects us. And sometimes when we're in a room with someone who's really in a good mood, that affects us. But it can affect us on far more small ways. And we can actually use it to connect with people, to learn, and that kind of thing.
Well, and even more than that, I feel like you can use it to quite literally create your own reality. Realizing that every single thought that we have literally puts energy out into the universe, every single one. And most of us as kids, good in, good out, or filth in, filth out, type of thing. And I didn't realize at the time just how true that is. Just how true that when my thoughts are either emotion, either negative or positive, how my outside world in those moments kind of reflect my reality. How nothing seems to go right when I'm in a negative mindset, and everything is just poor me. And really all it changes is perspective. Instead of getting angry that you got the red light, it's an opportunity for traffic to flow freely. That it's kind of beautiful, really, in a way. So
I had never thought of a red light as being beautiful, but it's all part of organization and synchronicity, and it makes a lot of sense.
And there's a lot less accidents because of it. So
That's true. So it helps us create safety. On the mirror neurons, when my husband, Chris, and I used to live in group homes as group home parents, we kind of had a saying, as Chris goes, so goes the house. Because everybody knew if Chris was in a good mood, everybody was in a good mood. And if he wasn't in a good mood, I could see it on our kids, on our foster kids that were there. We had usually 8 to 10 foster kids at a time. And they would pick up on his energy and start being cranky too. And I would have to go to him and be like, babe, you got to perk this up because that's affecting everybody. And he would. He always accepted that feedback really well. But there was something, and I wondered what it was about him. Did he have stronger, and I didn't even know what mirror neurons were then. Did he have stronger mirror neurons that they just caught on to? Did he put his energy and thoughts out more forcefully? And he may have, because he has a very powerful personality.
That he does.
He does. But I wish I had known about mirror neurons back then so I could have understood why it was. I just knew it was a phenomenon that it just was that way. So that's pretty fantastic.
That's amazing. It really is.
So what steps have you found recently that have guided you on your path?
So most recently, I've been meditating a ton. Every day, I really started just kind of diving into it. It really kind of started with the quantum physics again, with the double slit experiment, which I'm sure you haven't talked about yet on this show.
I haven't. Wasn't I the one that showed you the double slit experiment?
Yes,
Great.
You were, and that changed everything. That started this research frenzy that I'm still on, and but if for the people listening that don't know the double slit experiment, go look it up on YouTube. It is absolutely fascinating and amazing. It'll explain it way better than I can.
And this show, for those that don't know, is on the radio live. It's also on YouTube live, and it's on Facebook live, and it will be posted to YouTube here very shortly. And I'll put a link in the comments for that video. Sorry, continue.
No worries. But then with that, just basically when it all is on the base level, on the quantum level, that we really don't know what matter is, that it's actually a wave until we observe it. And when we observe it, it comes into existence, which again backs up the whole what you're thinking really creates your reality.
Right.
And so with that, I started. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to give the teeny tiny explanation. And the double slit experiment, there's a million videos on it on YouTube, which I'll post a couple of them in the description. But the basic gist of it is that they did this experiment, and when they were watching the outcome actively, the outcome was different than when they weren't watching it. That's the basic gist of it. And what that tells us is that when we pay attention to something, when we put our focus on something, literally all it takes is to put our focus on it in order to change the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Meditating has been amazing for me. If we realize, we used to think that the brain controlled the heart, but what they're also finding out that the reason why breathing exercises and yoga and some of those are so powerful is because by us controlling our breath and therefore controlling our heart rate, then we actually put our brains on a different frequency. that we literally can calm down that anxiety that exists in our brains just by practicing some breathing exercises. So meditating has been absolutely huge for me. I decided to just dive into it, practice my breathing, and start doing it every day and just kind of see what happens. And it's been just ridiculous how many signs, how much things just happen that I cannot explain that are just amazing. I just cannot explain. I did a QHHT session here with Della, and
just real quick, we won't go into all the details of that, but QHHT is quantum healing hypnosis technique. And I am a QHHT practitioner, so I did a session with Cody.
And during that session, talking and meditating with my higher self and just getting so much wisdom. And I mean, still to this day when I listen to it, I'm like, where did that even come from? I didn't know that. And just listening to my own advice has been such a change in my entire life, between me and my lady's relationship, between my work, between everything. It's amazing.
Do you want to give us maybe one or two of those little things that have been so influential for you?
So one would be, I told myself to accept the challenge, accepting the challenge. And this idea I had never really even thought of before. I didn't really understand even the significance of it at the time. But while I was doing this meditation, I told myself that in all my just my entire life, if I really want to be successful on any kind of level, I really need to fully accept the challenge. And just by that little shift, accepting the challenge, at the time I hadn't even fully accepted the fact that I had started my own business yet, and really accepted that challenge. And every day that I get up and I actually fully accept that challenge and I fully do what I need to do, I am just blown away at the results every single time. It's pretty ridiculous.
One thing that you told yourself during our QHHT session, do you mind if I expound on that just a little bit?
It's not at all. Go for it.
Because I respect your privacy and I don't want to share any of that information.
I'm an open book.
You also told yourself that when you accept the challenge, the outcome is assured.
Yes.
I don't think that was the exact wording of it, but that was basically...
That was, the basis of it, that when you fully accept the challenge, the law of attraction, the universe conspires for it to work out for you. When you fully put your focus on whatever, just like those brain waves, you are literally putting everything into focus. I think it's important to realize that every single thing in your life existed in your brain before it ever did in reality.
Absolutely.
That you literally created up there first, whether it be going to DSU or your new car or whatever, you imagine it was there before you actually started doing it. And when we realize how powerful that is, then we can realize that we can change our entire lives and do whatever we want. It's kind of amazing, really.
It really, really is. And I've used that advice myself since I did the QHHT session with you, because it was such a cool session. And through using that hypnosis technique, we were able to allow you to give yourself your best advice. And I was writing down notes. I was like, this is so cool. Guys, we have come to the end of today's show. But we are going to keep Cody here because I want to keep talking to him. So he and I are going to keep talking. We're actually we're finishing the end of today's radio show right now. And we're going to keep talking. We're going to keep recording. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, keep on rolling through. And what Cody and I talk about for the next half hour, all the radio listeners will get to hear next week, Monday at 4:30, right here on Radio St. George 100.3. So, Cody, thank you so much for being here today. If you want to say goodbye to the radio listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Great. So we're going to keep talking. In fact, I want to keep talking about that accept the challenge thing, because something really cool happened the other day. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube, stick around. For all your radio people, thanks so much. We'll see you next week. So we're still here, and I'm going to take a minute to save all this and set up the recording for next week. But for our YouTube and Facebook watchers, I wanted to tell this story because this was really cool. We've both been talking about accepting the challenge. Accept the challenge. And when I set a goal, and I've had some pretty big goals in my life that I've recently accepted the challenge for, and I'll let you know when what the outcome of those challenges are. But I was actually texting Cody. Had my phone and I was texting him about accepting the challenge. I was having some certain thoughts on it, and whenever I get thoughts like that, I know I can text Cody because he gets it, he understands it. And I think in this text I wrote accept the challenge 6 times. I went back and counted. I wrote accept the challenge 6 times. And this happened yesterday. I was sitting at home and I had my TV on, but I wasn't paying attention to it. I was actually reading a book and texting Cody. And I was watching HGTV, and it was Chip and Joanna Gaines for their show. And in the background, I'm typing accept the challenge. And I hear on the TV, so I'm asking you now, will you accept the challenge? And I went, what? And I looked over at the TV, and it was Chip and Joanna Gaines doing their little thing. And he had said to her, will you accept the challenge? And it kind of blew me away because I had literally just been typing that. And I've had a few of those synchronicities show up. In fact, you and I have one more that happened to both of us that we'll talk about here towards the end. Cody, can I ask you to just ramble for a minute so I can save this on the computer and get ready for the next show?
Absolutely. Furthermore on that whole accept the challenge, something that I thought was really kind of crazy and just pretty awesome is right after that I was researching something called flow, which I will get more into here in a second. But when I was watching this Netflix show with my lady Danielle, which Della also knows very well.
I do.
And
she's wonderful and beautiful and so smart.
Yes, she is. And on the TV show, right, probably an hour or so after Della here had texted me accept the challenge. It was awesome. Literally, the thing she texted me was, Cody, accept the challenge. And when I was just researching some more on flow, I heard on this TV show, in order to succeed, these guys are really going to have to accept the challenge. And it just took me back. I had no idea that I'd even heard that before or that it was used so commonly. But just those moments where you just see these little signs. We kind of talked about signs and omens earlier, on that you're on your golden path. But when you see them, when you actually are on your golden path, they're just so profound and there's no denying them, which I thought was just super amazing. So anyway, when you go back into the videos and look at the double slit experiment, it is definitely leave some comments. I want to see what some of you guys think out there, because it just blew me away. What they did in a nutshell is they actually took electrons, or the building blocks of matter, and decided to shoot them through a few slits. And we have a spectator here right now.
Keep talking.
Do we need it? Okay.
You just keep talking. Give me 1 second, guys.
Absolutely. And when they started shooting these electrons, it came out as a when it was through one slit, it came out as a solid. Hold on here. Okay.
You were live on the air. Everything you were saying was live on the air. Okay. And my shows. Second movement is marked Andante Semplice. So you guys are doing.
We were just continuing.
Oh.
Because we were going to record next week's too.
Oh,
while I
okay.
have him here.
Okay.
So that's why we're going longer.
So.
But I forgot to do that.
So did you think you stopped the show?
I stopped the audio recording.
Okay, but you were still live on the air.
I see.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that what you meant to do?
No, I meant to get off the air, and when I did that.
Oh.
record the video.
Oh. And the video's still going.
Yeah, it is.
I'll get out of the video.
Well, you're in all my videos.
I know. Okay. So we have music on.
We want this down so we don't hear it, right? There
You
we
want
go.
Program 2. And then, yeah.
So from there we can keep
Put
going.
the mic on.
Okay.
And then you have to edit all that crap. I'm sorry.
It's not hard.
Okay. I know.
Thank you.
It's not.
That
Thank
was
you.
my mistake.
It's all good.
Thanks for being awesome.
I'm only halfway awesome. There we go. You guys are good.
Well, better than half centaur.
Not if you're half mermaid.
I guess, well, I apologize for anybody watching. That's our producer, Sean, who runs the radio show here. And he actually made a joke the other day about being half centaur, but being the wrong half.
Oh,
So that's where that came from.
that's awesome. So anyway, with the double slit experiment, real quick, they just started shooting electrons to see what matter, just kind of on a quantum level, what matter did. And when they shot it through one slit, it appeared as solid. It was one solid slit on the background, background, yeah. And when they shot it through two slits, it was an interference pattern, more like a wave. And then when they went to measure it or observe it, it became solid and was just two solid slits, just a solid matter pattern. But again, I totally butchered that, and you guys definitely just need to go check out the video and tell me what you guys think.
Great idea. Well, like I said, I'll put a link to that video. I apologize for the interruption here. Probably for the YouTube video, this is going to be cropped out because YouTube makes that surprisingly easy to do. So here in just a minute, I'm sorry, guys, I'm getting the radio stuff figured out so we can start recording next week's show. All right, you ready, Cody?
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. Welcome, everybody, to the Extraordinary Talk Show with your host, Della Hill, and my very, very good friend, Cody Ramala, has joined us again for this week as well, which, for those of you watching on YouTube, this is the same video because Cody's just still here with me in the studio.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm so glad to have Cody here. If you missed the previous half of this, we were talking about Cody and his journey and how he got to be where he's at now on his golden path. But part of the reason I wanted to invite him here today was so he could talk to us about flow. We're going to talk about flow. And I've heard of flow in several different ways, and Cody and I have talked about flow. One part of flow, or one definition of flow, is in the Chinese Tao. Like if you've ever read the Tao of Pu, or there's a million different books about Tao if you want to look into that. But they call flow thoughtless doing, and it's pronounced wu-wei. If I'm sure I butchered that, but if you were to look it up, it's pronounced wu-wei, and it's considered effortless, thoughtless doing.
Yeah.
But you know flow as kind of something more than that. So why don't you tell us how you first found flow?
Wow. So when I very first came across, it's weird when I think about it. Before I actually knew what flow was, the very first time, I keep finding more and more incidents of when I achieved it. I've been watching a lot about flow, and by the way, flow is the actual scientific term they came up with. It's defined as the optimal level of consciousness, and it literally is thoughtless doing. When I very first encountered flow, I was longboarding down the side of a mountain called Grand Targhee, or was the road up to Grand Targhee, rather. A ski resort. It's 7 miles down the side of a mountain, and while I was longboarding, there was a time when there was a couple cars coming up, and when you're going down the side of a mountain on a longboard and you have to get in one lane, you pick up speed really, really fast. And when we did that, we had to step up to the challenge or get extremely hurt. And so we did, and I did it, and it was very addicting. It was the most amazing feeling I've ever experienced in my life. In that moment, there was nothing going in my head. There was no sense of self. There was it was just the task at hand and doing it as safely as possible. And it was amazing, and I was addicted. I had no idea what just happened to me. All I knew is I wanted to go up and longboard again. I'm like, let's go do that again. That was awesome, And I wouldn't encounter flow until, this year actually. When I very first even heard about flow, it was actually from you, who suggested Stephen Kotler, who's wrote a couple books on it. And he actually has started an institute called the Flow Genome Institute, and it's all about the research and study of flow and what has been happening with it. And so with flow, do you want me just to dive right in? Or?
Well, real quick, because I want a little bit of credit. So as I remember it, and tell me your story, was Cody had come to one of the meditation nights that I talk about when we do those. We'll be having one next Monday. And he had messaged me after one of the meditations, and do you want to tell me about that, because that's kind of your side of it?
Sure. So Della was leading a guided meditation, and during my guided meditation, I asked myself how to. I don't remember exactly what it was that I asked myself, but it was like, how do I gain more peace in my life? How do I gain more abundance in my life? How do I gain more of what I'm seeking in my life? Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, but I saw a four-wheeler
during the meditation.
During the meditation, four-wheeling is one thing that I've always loved doing ever since I can remember, and one of the many times that I'm very easily able to flip the switch into flow. And so I saw a four-wheeler and knew I had to go riding. So on the way home, I told Danielle, I don't know why, but I saw a four-wheeler. I think I need to figure out how to get a four-wheeler and go riding. And I'm kind of starting a side business with my dad. And out of nowhere, he found a quad, and 2 days later, he bought it. And that weekend, we were riding. And
so all the pieces just came together.
Yeah, and it was very much, some weird manifestation that it was just amazing. It did not expect that to happen, especially as quickly as it did. And when it happens that quickly, when you're manifesting, you kind of doubt it. At least I do.
You're like, nuh-uh, that couldn't have just happened.
Exactly. But then you're the one that said that makes sense, and this is your part. So
okay, well, because you had messaged me and told me how excited you were because you saw the quad during your meditation, and then you were with your dad. He came to you and said he was going to buy one, and you were so excited. And you told me in the message that you love riding four-wheelers because when you do that, it's like all thoughts go, and you're just completely in the moment. And I said, that sounds like flow. Have you read this book by Stephen Kotler?
Yeah, and that's where it all started. Actually, is she said, yeah, that sounds like you entered into flow, and I had no idea what that even was, and I even felt silly that like, oh yeah, I manifested and saw a four-wheeler, because it just seems so trivial. But when she explained it like that, I was like, oh, that totally makes sense. And so I started.
And I sent you some videos, which I'll also post in the description of this video.
Yeah, some videos of Stephen Kotler talking about it, and there's some great. In fact, I'll send you some that I've came across lately that are just amazing as well.
Good. Do you want to hold up the book to the camera so that people who are watching can see that? This is Stealing Fire by Stephen Kotler.
And sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to, if you don't mind, I was going to tell just a little bit about Stephen Kotler. Mm-hmm. And he was actually, his story's so cool. He was super, super sick. I think he kind of thought he was going to die. He was broke. He couldn't work, had given up all of his money to his Medicare or medical costs. And he was basically just hoping that tomorrow would be a good day that he could get out of bed for 20 minutes. And one of his friends came over and said, dude, you're not laying here. You're going surfing with us. I don't care whether you like it or not. And they almost carried him to the car. Mm-hmm. and got him to the beach and put him on the biggest, fattest, easiest to ride surfboard that they had and sent him out in the water. And was 3-4 hours later, he came back and he said it was an unreal experience. He said while he was on the waves, he didn't feel sick. He forgot that he was sick. All of his thoughts were gone. And it was only about being completely in the moment, just like you riding four-wheelers. And when he got home, it took him 3 days to recuperate because he had worn his body out so much. But in doing that, when he was able to go into flow, it created all these chemicals in his brain that actually healed his body. And over the next few months, his body gained a lot of strength. He got a lot better. And now you would never know that he was ever that sick.
Yeah, absolutely. He said that when he went out for the first time, his body was about 10% energy. Like he was very, very low, very basically dying, like you said. And then he said as soon as he was done surfing, he was at about 80% energy. That he just become all sense of time, all sense of self, all sense of everything just disappeared, and he just completely forgot he was sick for a moment, and he wanted to explore that, and that's what started all of this off. Thankfully, it did. You know?
You're right.
In fact, when you very first suggested the book, it was called Superman: The Rise of the Superhuman, which is all actually about like the Red Bull athletes and pro athletes and how they enter into flow. And that's the one I was actually seeking out when I found Stealing Fire. And I'm so glad I did, because I haven't read Superman yet, so I can't say it's better or anything like that. But the information in this book is just absolutely mind-blowing. I just had no idea how huge flow was. And before I go into how huge it is, those 5 neurochemicals that Della here was talking about are actually dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, I might butcher this.
Norepinephrine.
Yes, and anandamide. And those actually are just this crazy cocktail of chemicals that you cannot produce artificially. It only exists within the body, and it only happens during flow. We actually all enter flow. What they're actually finding out is, I mentioned, or Della mentioned surfing, and I mentioned some pro athletes, but people go into flow, or parts of flow. There's called microflow, and there's called deep flow, or I don't think it's quite called that, but that's what it is. And something as simple as someone who's afraid of public speaking raising their hand in the class and taking that challenge, accepting the challenge, they'll actually enter into flow when that happens.
Well, and because one thing is very important in order to get into flow, there's one ingredient, which is challenge. Isn't that right?
They actually put it on, there's 4 different ingredients to the flow cycle, and they're pretty much what has to happen every time for you to enter into flow. And let's see here, where did I put that down? It's struggle. So just that moment, kind of a fear of like, oh, do I raise my hand, or do I go this fast on the quad, or do I go down, whatever it is. There's that struggle, that moment of fear that you have to get past. And then
because if you give into the fear, you're never going to find flow.
Exactly. In Stephen Kotler, he actually explains in one of his talks, is he's an author, when he writes a book, that he kind of goes crazy for a moment. He takes notes, he interviews people, his office is full of strings everywhere, and this might be a chapter, that might be a chapter, to the point of almost going mad, where he's just like, I can't take it anymore. And he said at that moment to release, to go do something else. Once you do that, then or when you're, if you're a pro athlete or doing an extreme sport, that moment of releasing your fear, saying, okay, we're going to do this. And in life, reading, going for a walk, anything, doing models, anything to kind of keep your mind off of what that struggle was. And that what happens is your subconscious starts taking over. Your subconscious starts taking over, and you actually literally form new neural waves in your brain to try to figure out how to solve this problem. And then oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
You're good.
I've talked before about rewiring your brain, that you can do it with repetition, but that's not the easiest way to do it. We know that neurons that fire together wire together. And this is one way to help your brain completely rewire the old patterns into new patterns. Sorry to interrupt, but go ahead.
No, that's awesome. And so the moment that your subconscious kind of starts taking over and forming those new neuroways is actually the moment that you start entering into flow. And so what's really interesting is after the struggle, you have to have that release. And during that release, you enter into flow. It's inevitable at that point. Kind of like when you accept the challenge, the rest comes. So it's pretty interesting. What's really interesting after that is after flow, you're going to have a depletion of neurochemicals in your brain. You're going to have this awesome, amazing bliss, and then it's going to be a depletion. Almost like, the next day after partying hard, you just don't, you have to recover. And that's what it's called.
I'm sure none of our listeners here in Southern Utah know what that's like.
Probably not. So the recovery part is essential. And so that, you kind of have to just kind of grit it. And like, there's going to be even some negative thoughts that happen during those times, during recovery, where like, you're not good enough or whatever. And you just kind of have to
remember that voice is a lie.
Exactly. That's your frontal cortex coming back online, your sense of self and anxiety and fear, and then you get to start the cycle all over again, which is actually pretty awesome. I mean, it really is amazing. And the more I just kind of went down the path of studying flow, the more it makes sense. What's really amazing is in this book, and I think I've told you a little bit about it, but flow is so powerful, and we're realizing its potential so much that our own government is actually spending millions of dollars to try to figure it out. In this book, they'll talk about SEAL Team 6 and how the newest SEAL training facility is actually to teach these guys how to enter into flow. The famous week where it's super hard in the SEALs, where
Thank you for not cursing on the radio.
Totally. Where it's just, complete almost torture. They're not trying to actually determine who's the toughest SEAL or who can do the most things. What they're really trying to find is who can flip the switch into flow, because when you're a SEAL, you have to communicate together without saying a single word. And you can only do that when you enter into flow. So only about 20% of people that even enter into SEALs make it. And this is exactly what they're testing for, is being able to enter into flow as a group.
As a group.
As a group.
And we know that when we meditate as a group, that it has a multiplication benefit.
Oh, absolutely.
So I would expect that flow as a group would be very similar.
So flow as a group, depending on the means to enter into flow, is actually easier. If you've ever been to a concert, or if you've ever been to anything that's powerful, I mean, even the artists, and they don't even realize that they're messing with the crowd's energy, that literally they're thriving and they know whether or not the crowd is responding almost instantly. And you'll talk to most musicians and they'll be like, oh yeah, absolutely. That's
well, when you consider the amount of mirror neurons that are being like scattered everywhere during a concert, you put 20,000 people in one arena and have them all focus on the same thing, which is that music. They're all sharing that. They're all of those heart torus energies are out there, and all of the mirror neurons are out there. And that's part of why we enjoy concerts so much, is that connection that we have with people.
Well, and then all of that is even amplified. So it's like not only even being a part of other people's energy, but because you're part of that energy, raising it to a whole new vibration.
Totally. Okay, now I want to clarify. You've talked about like music stars and big athletes using flow and the SEAL team using flow, but what about just like day-to-day people that might be listening to the radio in St. George today?
So everybody actually enters into flow. These are all just examples of stuff that you might have experienced, but even when you're doing something as simply as driving and zoning out, you are actually entering into microflow. You are
and that's what I would call an alpha state, because that's when the brain goes into an alpha level.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it starts, I believe, releasing a little bit of dopamine into your system, and which is a pleasure neurochemical. And when that happens, you start entering into a micro flow state. And so it's actually, we do it without even thinking about it. We do it effortlessly. And the more we study it, the more we're coming out with tools and just knowing exactly how to enter into it. I mean, if you guys actually go to the Flow Genome Institute, they have a program that's specifically designed for you to enter into flow more easily.
Right on. And we'll put a link to that in the description.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. I realized that I was going into flow at work, and for my day job, I write reports all day. I'm a nurse, and I review charts and then write reports on them, which can be kind of monotonous. And one thing about flow is you have to have challenge. I found that if I only do write the reports and that's all I do, I get bored super easy. So I had to challenge my brain more. So I started a split screen at work, and I would have all my reports on the right-hand side that I'm working on, that I'm doing, and then I would turn on YouTube on the other side, and I wouldn't really watch it. I would, because it would be in my periphery, but I would pick videos I could listen to and get everything I needed from listening to it. So I'd just stick an earbud in and do my work. And then because my brain had to work a little bit harder, I had to do the work and pay attention to the video and still stay accurate and pay attention and make sure that I was doing a high quality job. It created a kind of challenge for me. And one thing that happened is I would, let's say, sit down after lunch, sit down, turn on my computer, get my work going, get my YouTube going in my ear. Next thing I know, it's 4:45 and it's time for me to go home. And I've completed more in 3.5 hours than I have in the last 3 days. And I realized after I learned about flow, oh, I'm going into flow when I'm doing that. So it can happen even just getting my work done.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like probably because you were having to use your brain more, but also in a creative way. Creativity is actually one of the fastest and easiest way to enter into flow. The more creative we are, the more we find ourselves finding that flow state. And so,
and that's why a lot of artists and musicians and creative people get into flow a lot. That's like when people write music, they are very often in flow when they're writing music and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you just made me think of when I was in high school. I guess I didn't realize I was entering into flow, but I used to write poems all the time. I was very easily able to express myself through poetry, and in fact, my ninth grade teacher, English teacher, ended up entering one of my poems in a contest, and I actually ended up winning it without my knowledge because she thought it was so good. But I had no idea. In fact, there was this huge assignment that was our final, and we could pick one of a few things, and one of them was writing 25 poems. And I'm like, I'll do that in a day, no worries, And I think I actually did end up doing it mostly in a day. And so it was just something that I could very easily, and it wasn't because it was creative or challenging. It was just because it was easy that I'm like, oh, I can do that. That's not a problem that I picked it. But I realized it was so easy for me because I just entered in a flow and the words would come out, and next thing you know, I had something beautiful wrote. So kind of interesting.
I think it's pretty fantastic. And I think that anybody who does creative things, like when I write sometimes, just same thing. And I've written poetry and other things, but there's times that the same thing will happen. I'll sit down and just start writing. And then the next thing I know, more time has gone by than I realized. And I've accomplished some great things. And when I go back and read it, I don't even remember writing everything that I wrote, but I clearly did. And it's really cool. In fact, it was really great for me when I learned about flow, because I was able to look at my life and go, oh yeah, I do flow here and I do flow here and I do flow here. I haven't ever found it. Oh, I don't know if I found it. I can't pinpoint a time in my life that I found it to the extreme point of riding a longboard down a 7-mile road on a mountain. I don't think I've ever done anything that intense, but I do like to drive fast and I do ride motorcycles. So I bet that looking at, if I were to go back and go for a motorcycle ride, which I need to do, I would probably find myself in flow pretty quickly. That actually makes sense because on the motorcycle, you do definitely have the additional challenge where you have to stay alert and aware of a lot of things. But it's also really beautiful because when you're in flow, you lose your sense of self. You lose your sense of time. All your ego goes away. And when you're riding a motorcycle, you become one with that motorcycle. So again, your sense of self goes completely away it either goes away or it fades. And it expands because instead of being just me, my own body, I am now one with this piece of machinery that can do things that I could never do by myself.
Yeah, I feel like it goes away in that moment, your sense of self, and the reason why is because when you're in that awareness, there is so right now we process about 1,000 or so bits of information a second. When you go into flow, what literally happens is your frontal cortex starts shutting down in your brain. We used to think that in order to use more of our brain, more neural ways need to fire all at the same time, kind of be hyperactive. During flow, it actually becomes hypoactive.
The opposite.
The opposite. Parts start shutting down. But when that happens, your sense of self, your sense of anxiety, your sense of just of importance, all of that disappears because literally your frontal cortex shuts down. And when that happens, you're able to process millions of bits of information a second. You're able to be so much one with the machine, with the road, with your surroundings, that you're processing so much that there is no room for your sense of self. So literally when you have your whole brain online, your sense of self actually goes up, and when that happens, you can't process as much information.
Oh, that's a great way to explain that. Is that your brain can only do so many things at one time, so you give it a project.
Yeah.
And while it's working on the project, the rest of your brain kind of fades. I think a similar thing happens in meditation.
Oh,
Where
absolutely.
you're focusing, all of your focus is on whatever it is that you're meditating on, and then the rest of your brain just kind of
That's what is so
goes floaty.
cool about this book is it goes into all that, including the meditation. The same thing that's happening in your brain when you're riding your motorcycle. It's the same thing that's happening to monks that have meditated for 30 years. The exact same thing. So you're absolutely right. It does happen, and they actually found that you can achieve that through rigorous practice in as little as 4 to 6 weeks meditating. So you don't have to do this extreme stuff. You don't have to go and ride forward. You don't even have to raise your hand during a meeting that you don't want to talk at. All you have to do is just start figuring out those, be creative, meditate if that's what's comfortable. Practice these positive things to form new neural ways in your brain that will lead you to flow.
great. So what are some of the things that you've been doing since you have learned about flow? How are you doing things differently to invite more flow?
So meditating is actually one of them. We talked about it in the last show. I meditate every day now. I lead Danielle through meditation. We actually fall asleep meditating now as well. I have a 8-hour meditation that I do every night with the YouTube, so it's playing in the background even when I sleep for my subconscious. That I'll give to you to include in the link as well.
Great, thank you.
The other things I've been doing, I've been just trying to, ride four-wheelers a lot more, which is always a blast. If any of you guys out there ride, hit me up. We'll go riding. But another thing that even Stephen Kotler was saying on one of his YouTube videos was a great way to form those new neural ways in your brain is to take a book at the end of the night and get it on something that does not interest you, something that you would never actually normally pick up, and read about 25 minutes worth of it every night. And what happens is as you sleep and as your brain intakes this new information that you didn't have before, then you are literally forming new neural ways in your brain and creating more creativity in your life to be able to more easily access flow. So just by going out of the norm, doing some of those things, even getting a balance board and practicing your balance in your core, all of those things are just going to help you introduce more flow into your life.
Fantastic. Cody, I'm so grateful that you were able to come here today with us, and I expect to invite you back again because you and I have some great conversations off the show and on the show, so I'm glad to have you here. I do want to remind everyone, we were talking about that great meditation at the group meditation that you came to where you saw the four-wheeler. We're doing another group meditation that will be tonight, which is September 17th for those listening on the radio right now. And it'll be downtown here in St. George in the Liptrix Plaza, just off the boulevard.
That's Shake Up Dixie.
Shake Up Dixie. And I can find the address for you. It's at 122 North, 500 East at Shake Up Dixie by Liptrix. So you can come ask Cody questions about flow because I'm guessing he's probably going to be there. and I'll be there to be guiding the meditation. Have you been enjoying those meditations, Cody?
Oh, absolutely. Danielle and I look forward to them every time. We wish they were more.
Well, maybe we'll have to do it more often. Well, thank you again, everybody, for listening, watching. We are going to end our radio show here in just a few seconds. We are going to tell one more story for the YouTube audience watching later. I hope that all of you guys are able to find some flow, find your golden path, find your own extraordinary. And remember, you don't have to believe everything that Cody and I are here to tell you. We're only here to encourage you to think for yourselves. So thanks for joining us on the Extraordinary Talk Show. And goodbye to all of our listeners on St. George Radio.
Did you want to tell that story first? Oh.
Now that we're off of the radio.
I got you.
All of our YouTube people. Okay, so this really cool thing happened just the other day. So I already told the story about the accepting the challenge when I heard the accepting the challenge in the background while I was texting you, literally typing out the words accepting the challenge, right? So there's two parts of this. There's this other story, my part and your part. So I was listening to a YouTube video by Dr. Michael Beckwith in the comments or in the description, and he was talking about questions to ask the universe. And when I ask questions of the universe, sometimes I just put it out there to the universe. Sometimes I ask God specifically, and very often I ask my higher self. I call her Big Della. She's smart. She knows a lot of stuff. But so I was asking what questions to ask the universe, and I'd had an earbud in, and I was kind of listening to the YouTube video, but I had mostly started ignoring it because I was having a conversation with Big Della. And I said, what do I have to do to be ready for what you're bringing me? And I got an answer right away. And when you talk to your big self a lot, you start to be a lot easier able to recognize it, right?
Absolutely.
So I got a message and I just repeated it out loud. And so I had my eyes closed and I've got the YouTube channel on, but I'm not paying attention. And I said to myself, when you're given an opportunity that seems awesome but big and you don't think that you're enough for it, say yes. And that hit me really hard. Like, okay, it's all right to accept a challenge that's bigger than I think I can do. It just means I have to stretch and grow. But say yes. And I got so excited about this. And as I'm repeating it out loud, I said it out loud. When you have that situation, say yes. And then echoing my own words in my earbud, I heard say yes. And I went, what? And I opened my eyes and I looked at my computer screen and it was right big on the video said, say yes. And I was like, whoa. So not only did I get that direct message from Big Della, but I got an immediate confirmation that what I got was a real thing and that I should truly, truly say yes. Because very often, if you're not used to listening to your higher self, if you think you get a message but you're not sure, you can ask for confirmation. You can ask for a sign that was really a message that was meant for you. And I got that sign immediately. And then I messaged you about it because I was so excited. And tell me what happened on your end.
Well, it was pretty crazy because on my end, earlier that same morning, I was also meditating. And when I was meditating, I asked my higher self, how do I manifest greatness in my life? How do I be just not the best in the world, but the best for the world? I just wanted to just do better at everything in my life. And so I asked him this, and I literally got the same exact answer. Say yes. Say yes, Cody. That you already are great. You are amazing. You just got to say yes. And so I was like, okay, say yes. I didn't really think too much of it at the time. But then maybe a half hour later, I have Della here texting me, so excited, telling me her better experience that just happened. And then she ended it with, just say yes, Cody, say yes. And I'm like, are you serious? Did you really? That is so crazy because I just got my confirmation as well. Just say yes. And it was pretty powerful when you have, again, just kind of like that Moonstone Beach that we said in that first session. When you have signs like that, there's no denying that you're on your path, that you're getting these omens for a reason, that you're, doing what you got to do. So,
and it's incredibly reassuring because accepting the challenge comes with some doubt.
Absolutely. I mean, for me too, I thrive when there's people on the same frequency as me. When I don't have those people around, like when I started going on my own adventures and didn't have my best friend around in the redwoods anymore, even, I kind of just get distracted easily. And so having just anybody on that same frequency as you, also giving you that confirmation, and with those mirroring neurons and all the higher frequency and just everything that is like, oh, you don't even have to say more. I know exactly what you're talking about. Absolutely, because this is happening to me too. It's pretty amazing.
And that's where the fires of friendship are really pretty cool, because when you're on your mountain and you're feeling all the cold and the doubt, if you have a friend that can light that fire of friendship for you, it really reignites the spark inside you too.
Absolutely.
Well, Cody, thanks again so much. I'm so glad you were here, and I'm going to have you back. But for all of our audience on YouTube and Facebook that's watching right now, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for having me.